Good day, everyone. Our discussion for today is about morphology and word formation process. So, contents of this template. Here's what you'll find in this presentation. Definition of morphology, definition of morphemes, types of morphemes, which are free and bound morphemes, derivational and inflectional morphemes, um, and the word formation process. So let's proceed with the reporters for this or presenters for this discussion. Morphology and morphemes will be discussed by Jade. Inflectional and derivational morphemes will be discussed by Erica. Me and Laika will discuss the word formation process. So, Jade will discuss the morphology. Go and present.
So thank you for that wonderful introduction, Lorraine. So let me start in introducing to you what is morphology. So morphology is the study of words and the internal structure of words. And morphology also looks at part of speech, intonation, and stress, and the ways context can change a word's pronunciation and meaning. Morphology differs from morphological typology, which is the classification of languages based on their use of words in psychology, and which is the study of words and how they make up languages' vocabulary. So, in a shorter explanation, morphology is the study of word structure and word formation. Next slide, please. So, what is a word? Word is the smallest independent units of language. So, later on, I will differentiate what is the difference between the word and the morpheme. So, next slide, please. So morphology, the term morphology is a Greek word and is a makeup of morph, meaning shape or form, and ology, which means the study of something. So like what I've said earlier, morphology is the study of word structure and word formation. Next slide, please. So just as sentences can be broken down into similar units or words, we can break words down into smaller meaningful parts. The smallest meaningful part of a word is called morpheme. So what is morphemes? Morphemes is a minimal unit of meaning or grammatical function. Next slide po.
So, what is free bound morphemes? So, free morphemes that can stand by themselves as a single word. These morphemes cannot undergo derivation and inflectional. Example, jump and cat. So, what is bound morphemes? Bound morphemes that cannot normally stand alone and are typically attached to another form. These morphemes create new words. These are affixes, prefix, suffix, and infix. Examples: the re, al, ed, s.
So trivia, the main difference between a morphemes and a word is that a morpheme sometimes does not stand alone, but a word by definition always stand alone. So next slide po. So ayon, the inflectional and derivational will be discussed by Erica.
So thank you, Jade. So we have two types of morphemes, which is derivational and inflectional morphemes. Next slide. So let's start with derivational morphemes. Derivational morphemes, these are bound morphemes to make new words or to make new words of different grammatical category from the stem. So for example, ISM. Another is FUL, AR, RE, IR, and etc. So meaning, derivational morphemes are affixes that are capable of either changing the meaning of the grammatical category of the word. So derivational morphemes, when combined with a root, change the semantic meaning of the part of speech of the affected word. For example, in the word happiness, the addition of bound morpheme ness to the root word happy changes the word from adjective happy to a noun happiness. So, next slide, please. Next is inflectional morphemes. These don't produce new words in the language but rather indicate aspects of grammatical function of a word. This means that inflectional morphemes are affixes that merely serve as grammatical markers and indicate some grammatical information about a word. It creates new form of a same word. So next please. Next slide please. There are 8 inflectional morphemes in the English language. These are S for noun plural, apostrophe S for noun possessive, S for verb present tense, ed for verb past tense, en for verb past participles, ing for verb present participle, er for adjective comparison, and est for adjective superlative. Next slide. So let's proceed in word formation process will be discussed by Lorraine and Laika.
Word formation process. So, the study of the origin and history of a word is known as its etymology, a term which, like many of our technical words, comes to us through Latin but has its origin in Greek. So, first is coinage. It is when a word is being created either deliberately and accidentally without using the other word formation process. So, coinage is a common process of word formation in English and it is the invention of totally new terms. The most typically sources are invented trade names for one company's product which become general terms for any version of that product. Like for example is Band-Aid. Band-Aid is a company name, but now we're using it as a new product for a bandage, a small sticky bandage. Next is next is borrowing. The abstract noun borrowing refers to the process of speakers adopting words from a source language into their native language. The word simply comes to be used by a speech community that speaks a different language from the one these words originated in. For example, alcohol. Alcohol is an Arabic word, basta, which we're using in Filipino as a word for enough, but is also a Spanish word. Next is compounding. Compounding words are formed when two or more lexemes combine into a single new word. So compounding words are formed when two words lexemes combine into a single new word. Compound words may be written as one word or as two words joined with a hyphen. Obvious English examples would be a noun and a noun compound, for example, as a note plus book for notebook. And an adjective, I mean, yes, an adjective and noun compound for blue plus berry is equal to blueberry. For verb plus noun compound for work plus room for workroom. Next is we have subtypes of reduplication compounding. There are words that are formally very similar to rhyming compounds but are not quite compounds. In English, because because the second element is not really a word. It is just a nonsense item added to a root word to form a rhyme. Like, for example, is higladi pigladi, tutsi wutsi. Next is clipping. Clipping is the process of forming a new word by dropping one or more syllables from a polysyllabic word, such as cell phone for cellular phone. Other example for this is a telephone for, yes, for a cell phone or cellular phone, or other example for chemistry for chem, gym for gymnasium, math for mathematics, prof for professor. Next is, okay, back formation. Back formation is a very specialized type of reduction process. Typically, a word of one type, usually noun, is reduced to form another word of a different type, usually verb. A good example of back formation is the process whereby the noun television first came to odd, and then the term televised is created to form it. Television for televise, donation for donate, babysitter for babysit. Okay. Okay. Next is conversion. Conversion is the word formation process in which a word of one grammatical formation becomes a word of another grammatical form without any changes to spelling or pronunciation. Okay. For example, the noun email in English before the verb. Example of this is a sentence. A decade ago, I would have sent you an email. An email there is a noun, whereas now I can either send you an email, email there is still a noun, or simply email you. The email there is already a verb. The original noun email experience conversion, thus resulting in the new verb email. So next, let's proceed to acronym, which will be discussed by Laika.
Thank you, Lorraine. And now I will continue the discussion of other word formation processes, which will start with acronym. A word formation process in which the first letter, sometimes the first few letters of the words in a phrase, are extracted and put together to form a word, pronounced as a word by the usual rules of English spelling with the same meaning as the original phrase. Acronym provide a way of shortening phrases into words. To provide you with some examples, here are Compact Disc or CCD, CHED and DepEd or Commission on Higher Education and Department of Education. Next one is National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which is NASA, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, which is UNESCO, Personal Identification Number, or PIN, Women Against Rape or War. Next one is derivation. Derivation is the most common word formation process, and it accomplished by means of a large number of small bits of the English language, which are not usually given separate listing in dictionaries. Derivation, a word formation process that involves turning one word into another. Most derivation is done by the addition of affixes, or these small bits are called affixes. To provide you with some examples, this is unhappy, misrepresent, prejudge, joyful, careless, and happiness. Next one is blending. The combining separate forms to produce a new single term is also present in the process of blending. Blending takes only the beginning of one word and joining it to the end of the other word. To give you some instance, if you wish to refer to the combined effects of smoke and fog, you may use the term smog. The recent phenomenon of fundraising on television that feels like marathon is typically called a telethon. And if you're extremely crazy about video, you may call it a video. And next one is if you will eat uh, in the the span of brunch and breakfast or lunch, you may call it brunch. Next one is reanalysis. Sometimes speakers unconsciously change the morphological boundaries of a word, creating a new morph or making old one unrecognizable. This happened in hamburger, which was originally hamburger steak chop and farm steak in the Hamburg style. But then hamburger is Hamburg plus er, then it is hamburger. Next one is folk etymology. A popular idea of a word's origin that's not in accordance with its real origin. Folk etymology refers to explanations for the meaning of words that are based on the history and structures of languages, but on imaginative or mistaking associations made between unrelated words. So, for example, or for an instance, the word albatross was coined to describe a white seabird because alba in Latin means white, when the bird's original name, from which the English is derived, is the Arabic al Gatas or the river, which is also the source of the name of Alcatraz Island. Another example is the term chaise lounge, which comes originally from the French chaise lounge or long chair, but came to be associated with the word lounge because it was comfortable. A recent example is the term herstory, which is play on words but has led some many people to Greek historia or investigation. To add, add some example, the asparagus then is now sparrow grass. Next one is analogy. Sometimes speakers taken an existing word as a model and form other words using of its morphemes as a fixed part and changing one of them to something new. With an analogically similar meaning, cheeseburger was formed the analogy of hamburger, replacing a perceived morpheme ham with cheese. For another example, here is carjack and skyjack were also formed by analogy of jack. Next one is novel creation. In novel creation, a speaker or writer forms a word without starting from other morphemes. It is as if the word is formed out of a whole cloth without reusing any parts. So novel creation, a word formation process in which a new word is creating from scratch. That is without using other words to create it via other word formation processes. Occasionally, long words are formed this way: bling, bling, crank, crank, and sometimes even words for new objects, blimp, or the heavy necklaces or heavy jewelries. Sometimes sound symbolism seems to play a role. The words either imitate sounds associated with the thing or else they sound in part like some other word or words in the same concept family. Some examples of now conventionalized words that were novel creation includes blimp or Google, the mathematically term, bling and possibly slang, which emerged in the last 200 years with no obvious etymology. Some novel creation seems to display sound symbolism in which a word's phonological from suggests its meaning in some way. And now we have this last word formation, which is creative spelling. Sometimes words are not formed by simply changing the spelling of a word that the speaker wants to relate or to the new word. Products names often involve creative spelling such as Mr. Clean. And that's all. That is the 14 word process formation that is part of morphemes or morphology. Thank you.
Thank you. And That's all for our report. I hope you learn a lot. So thank you very much. Stop recording na.